If you were sent out, if you were commissioned to go to a foreign land, and you were commissioned to bring the gospel of Yeshua, and you were told, well, you can bring the Tanakh. I know there's 27 books in the New Testament, but you can only bring 3. You need to pick 3 from the New Testament and go. I would tell you one of those books must be Hebrews. There are things that are said in this book you won't find anywhere else in the New Testament. I mean, this is powerful. What we're embarking on, you won't find anywhere else in the New Testament with such a comprehensive display of what it means to be in the new covenant, the elements that are involved, the implications of that. As we move from the old into the new, what does that look like? It is the most comprehensive detailing you will find anywhere in Scripture. The first thing I want to look at here is it is the most controversial, the most debated. And that is the authorship. Who is responsible for writing this book? That depends who you ask, because scholars are scattered all over the place on this. Some would tell you Jude has written this epistle. Others would tell you Silas, one of Paul's companions. He wrote this epistle. Still others will tell you Clement of Rome, and from the first century. He's responsible for writing this. Tertullian of Carthage, he actually came forward and he said it was Barnabas. Again, a companion of the Apostle Paul, who's actually, when you go to Acts, you read the book of Acts, he's actually called Zeus. I mean, when him and Paul went out, they went out in power, okay? And so Tertullian looked at this and he thinks it's Barnabas. Martin Luther said it was Apollos. See, you read Acts 18, it says he was mighty in word. He was eloquent with his word. He was mighty in scriptures. I have a King James Bible. It's a facsimile, actually, of King James 16:11. And here's what's interesting. At the very end of the book of Hebrews, it tells you, or what they think, who wrote this epistle. And here's what it looks like. This is an actual snapshot from my Bible. Written to the Hebrews from Italy by Timothy. You don't find this portion that is in red here in the Textus Receptus or the received text by which the New Testament was taken off. You're not going to find these in the manuscripts. This was added by the translators of the day, this little ending part. But it shows you they had a perspective who is responsible for this. Isn't it interesting that a lot of these selections by various scholars over various generations are associates of Paul? And then, of course, we got the last. I saved the best for last. There are some who believe that the Apostle Paul actually wrote this epistle. And I want to give a little bit of history, and I want to give some commentary on this. And what I want to do is I want to take you to Eusebius's work, known as Historia Ecclesiastica. Eusebius was a prolific historian, a prolific apologist, a brilliant scholar. And his work is so vital for us understanding what was happening early on in Christianity. And within his work, he actually brings up a gentleman by the name of Clement of Alexandria, not to be confused with Clement of Rome. Clement of Rome is from the 1st century. Clement of Alexandria is from the 2nd century. Eusebius, who comes later than Clement, he quotes Clement, because it's important. The aspect of Eusebius quoting Clement is important because now you're getting closer to the autograph. You're going back in time. We're getting as close as we can, if you will, to the actual time this was penned. And so Eusebius, he quotes Clement, and this is what he says. Listen to what he says. He, Clement, says that this epistle to the Hebrews is the work of Paul, and that it was written to the Hebrews in the Hebrew language, but that Luke translated it carefully, published it for the Greeks, and hence the same style of expression is found in this epistle and in the Acts. So you get what was just said. So here Eusebius is referring to an earlier man than himself, getting closer to the autograph. And he says, Clement says it was actually the work of Paul, but he didn't write it. It's his work, it's his thoughts, it's his minds, but Luke wrote it. That's fascinating. We're given another bit of detail here that I think is fascinating. is that he believed it was originally, Clement said, it was originally written in Hebrew. The only other book in the New Testament that we know, according to history, that was originally written in Hebrew was the Gospel of Matthew. No other book, just Matthew, and now we have the Gospel of Hebrews that's being said this, but then we're told that it was translated in Greek. I want to be clear, the Hebrews that we have is that original Greek. So he goes on and he says this, but he says that the words, Paul the apostle, were probably not prefixed because in sending it to the Hebrews who were prejudiced and suspicious of him, he wisely did not wish to repel them at the very beginning by giving his name. In other words, what he's saying is you won't find the words, the name Paul the apostle attached to this letter anywhere. You won't find any name, actually, with the exception of the King James 1611, and that was added by the translators. But in the manuscripts, there's no name given. But here's what's interesting. Clement of Alexandria actually comes forth, and he says, well, this is because Paul did not want to hinder the important gospel, the important message that is embedded within this epistle in any way. This is a fascinating commentary because go back to the book of Acts. And what do we know about the Apostle Paul? He is the most controversial Jew that has ever lived in the history of this world, with the exception of Messiah Yeshua himself. That is a fact. Go to Acts 21. Fellow Jews, even believers, people are talking about you that you're going out telling the Jews they don't need to keep the Torah, that they don't need to circumcise their children. The assembly's going to meet because you're here, Paul. There's controversy swirling. And it's brilliant. As you see, Clement of Alexandria, he's just pointing out, he goes, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense for Paul's name not to be on it, to hinder, to be a stumbling block. Clement of Alexandria had a pupil that actually surpassed him in fame. His name was Origen. He says that the verbal style of the epistle entitled to the Hebrews is not rude like the language of the Apostle Paul, who acknowledged himself rude in speech, that is in expression, but that its diction is pure Greek. Anyone who has the power to discern differences of phraseology will acknowledge. I want to explain what was just said. Origen is commenting on the fact that go gather the epistles of Paul. All the epistles we have, gather them together, read them, study them, learn them. Then go read the epistle of the Hebrews. And what you will find is they are night and day. They're not even comparable when it comes to the style of writing. The style of writing of Hebrews, and this is what scholars will tell you, they will tell you that whoever wrote Hebrews was classically trained. They were trained in this art. This was their craft. They were brilliant. It is a sophisticated presentation of the word, the most sophisticated presentation that we have in all the New Testament, with one exception, and that is the work of Luke. Origen is not done with his commentary. He brings out, being a brilliant scholar, he brings this reality out. He says anybody could figure this out, that these writings are totally different. But then he goes on and says, moreover, that the thoughts of the epistle are admirable and not inferior to the acknowledged apostolic writings. Anyone who carefully examines the apostolic text will admit, if I gave my opinion, I should say that the thoughts are those of the Apostle Paul, but the diction and the phraseology are those of someone who remembered the apostolic teachings and wrote down at his leisure what had been said by his teacher. Therefore, if any church holds that this epistle is by Paul, let it be commended for this. For not without reason have the ancients, now Origen's referring to all the men before him, the ancients handed it down as Paul's. But who wrote this epistle in truth? God knows. Absolutely fascinating. So he builds upon what his mentor said. Origen comes along and says, there isn't a question. Paul did not write this. However, his opinion, which matches up with Clement of Alexandria's, this is the work of Paul. And I'm going to share with you my thoughts, never for a moment of just me studying the New Testament, studying, being immersed in the epistles of Paul and being immersed in Hebrews. Never even for a moment did I doubt the authorship or the work, that it was the work of Paul. As we go through Hebrews and we start to go, I'm going to be pointing this stuff out because there is Paulinisms all over the place that come directly from him. There's no question about that. And so you're going to see that. So in regard to authorship, we can sum up, there's a lot of debate. But if you go to early history, it makes a lot of sense as to what happened. It would make a lot of sense why Paul, in a very unique and unusual fashion, would not affix his name to this specific letter, considering he was a controversial individual.
Hey there, this is Mike at Corner Fringe Ministries. Thanks for watching our video. If you liked the video or it encouraged you, do us a favor. Hit the like button, don't forget to hit the share, and if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button. Now, if you want to watch the rest of this video, hit the button here. And if you want to watch the rest of this series, you can check it out here. And don't forget, you can download the Corner Fringe Ministries app today on any of your Play stores. Thanks for joining us at Corner Fringe Ministries.